The Ronin 4D 8K. Should you get one of these? I'm going to share with you everything that I wish I knew before I bought it, everything this camera does. It's a really cool camera, but there are some limitations that I do want to go over that's really tough to find on the internet. I hope this video helps you when you're looking at one of these bad boys and making the right decision. I want to start off by saying that this channel used to be like a review channel for general products. I am going to change it to specifically reviewing camera products. And it's because this is what I do for a living. I spend a lot of money in this field. I've been doing it for a long time. Working in video production as a producer, as a cinematographer, and also as a sound person. So I have a lot of experience in this area. So I do feel like this is where I'm most helpful and useful to you guys. So let's start off with some of the cool things this does. It has the 4-axis stabilizations, obviously. I'm sure you've seen videos on this if you've landed on my page by now. It does some really cool things, especially when you pair it with things like an easy rig or a tilt-a-float. It's a really fun camera, and it does get a cinematic look to it. It's got really good dynamic range. It's pretty easy to set up out of the box, just for shooting as it is. There's some caveats that I'll explain later on. It's pretty easy to operate, it's generally pretty user-friendly if you can operate things like a Sony camera or a Blackmagic. I feel like you can definitely operate this, especially the menu on this is very similar to a Blackmagic, navigating around and getting through the menu. Now, in terms of setting this thing up, the first thing you're gonna have to do is make sure that it's out of the lock mode and all those things. It doesn't come that way out of the box. You're gonna turn this thing on and it's not gonna turn on. Nothing's gonna happen. It's gonna, give you, it's just not gonna do anything. Read the instructions, it'll say hit the lock button, all that stuff, and then it'll power on. You will then have to connect it to the DJI Assistant 2 app and activate this camera. So you'll connect it through the USB-C port on the side here, right to your computer, and it's gonna load up pretty quickly in the DJI app. On your Mac or whatever, and it finds it pretty quickly. There's not really any problems with this part of it. Seems to find everything, and then it's going to go through its update process for the firmware and everything. Just make sure everything that you want on this camera, like the lens and all that stuff, is connected, because I believe it runs the updates for everything that's connected to it through it. The next thing you'll probably want to do is you probably did get one of these high bright monitors. You're going to want to run the firmware update for this as well, so you're going to have to connect that. If you have the Zenmuse focus motor, you're gonna wanna connect that and run the updates for that as well. The whole connecting and update process and everything took me like an hour for everything to get set up. I did have to put a different lens on this, obviously, because this has built-in, focus motors and everything. So for the Zenmuse focus motor. So you're gonna wanna put something like a Sony Prime on there. I do wanna talk about that while we're on the topic. There's a huge list of lenses that are compatible with this camera, according to DJI. The 24-70 G Master 2. I did see videos where people put that on there and balanced it. Now, I will say you can get it to balance on here. It is pretty precarious though. I do not like the way those lenses balance on here. You also will not be able to use any of the zoom functionalities. The autofocus features does work pretty well for the Sony lenses on this, so that will work. Now, speaking on the zoom portion of those lenses, there is no way to change the focus wheel on the DJI Ronin 4D to do the zoom function. So you can't change it between, zoom in and focusing like you might be able to do on some other devices. So you're stuck with this just being a focus motor. If you tried to turn on the focus motor on this and, just move it around to the zoom section, I think you're just gonna do that. It doesn't work. I don't know why. If it's because it reads that the lens that you connected does already have focus built into it, and it's just not letting you turn it on, but you can't operate it that way. It's very disappointing, because I was looking forward to putting on, some of these lenses and be able to operate the zoom on it. And even if you could, it probably would throw off the balance of this little gimbal head. Now, I do see people doing things like putting the weight on there and all that stuff. It's like 300 grams. The thing is, when you start getting into putting on that motor and then putting that on the head, you're putting a lot of stress on this motor. And, I've heard that it's okay from other people online. It's not something that I really feel comfortable risking because of what I spent on this camera. So, you're around $10,000 for the camera, and then all the accessories with the flex and everything, and the monitor and the receiver. You're getting pretty close to 20K on this camera. So DJI support is not the greatest, I will say that. So when you work with them for any issues that you have, it's pretty tough to deal with them. So it's not something I feel comfortable testing the boundaries of on this camera, because I feel like I'm gonna have a problem with the support section if something does break. So that's something to be aware of when you're purchasing this camera. But what this camera does do well, nothing else really does it. It does what it does extremely well. If you're gonna get onto like a hoverboard or to like a one wheel or something, this thing's gonna be sweet. It's really cool in the car. When you get the flex system on there, it does a lot of really cool things. I did buy the Cobra Strike monopod to go with it, which is cool because you can disconnect the bottom portion of it and use it kind of as a stand. One of the things I did more recently is I was doing an interview where a guy was just talking to his team members, and I just kind of set this on one of the desks, and this thing just tracked and followed him everywhere. It was kind of like I just set the camera up and I didn't really have to work much, which is really cool. When you do put the head of this onto a monopod, you can get some really cool like push and twist type things. It does seem to stabilize. I'm not sure if there's something built into the software pretty good without the Z-axis portion of it, because you won't be able to use the Z-axis when you do put this on like a monopod. You're gonna lose that Z-axis obviously, because you're just gonna have the tilt and the roll. But it does seem to handle that pretty well. The footage that I've done with it looks pretty stable and pretty solid. So going back to the lenses, I do have this Sony E-mount adapter. Getting these things on and off is, this thing turns and then twists. It's just kind of like a weird like locking design. It's not like you can't figure it out. I mean, everybody is probably used to these sort of things by now, like working on the camera world. This one just feels like it's just a little strange, and you have to be careful when you click in these lenses. They do have to have this like little like snap and pop type thing. It's just not like my favorite design or system for this. I feel like this was just, like how this kind of locks in, and then you have this like little button here. It's just not like the smoothest thing. I did have one situation where I did put this on, and then the lens started like falling off because this wasn't locked in all the way. So you just got to make sure it clicks all the way over to the right there. Another thing I did notice is if you put these adapters on the camera first and then put the lens on there, how we typically would, it's really tough to get these lenses on there. It's easier taking the adapter off and connecting it to the lens and then connecting the whole unit to the DJI Ronin 4D. You probably will run into that problem, and you'll thank me for telling you that information later. So with regards to the lens compatibility list, my suggestion or recommendation would be to stick with prime lenses. The Athena and Nisi primes fit pretty well. They have a very low profile. The form factor is great for this, and they balance really well. Same thing with the 35 to 50 Sony lenses. Those are what I put on here so far. Those fit very well. But when you start getting into the zoom territory, that's where things get kind of weird. And then you start, getting into like adding rails and then just locking it down. And then this thing just becomes a camera. So what's the point of having a Ronin 4D if you're just going to turn it into a camera? You might as well just get something cheaper like a Sony FX3. It's got a little bit better dynamic range. It does what that does very well. But in terms of like the stabilization and moving around stuff, it's kind of like a poor man's Steadicam type of thing. Doesn't quite cover all those grounds, but it gets you some nice, stable, smooth shots. And that's just what this does. It doesn't do, the zoom lens thing outside of what they give you, which is DJI, which is the 17 to 28 Zenmuse lens, which is an incredible lens. I think it looks great, and you'll be happy with just, using that lens for the most part. But when you want to get in nice and tight, you don't want to get in close physically, you're probably just going to put in like a tighter prime. So a couple things on the startup of this: you are going to want to unlock all the accesses of this gimbal so it's nice, loose, and free. And if it's out of balance a little bit, you can hold it. Balancing this is pretty simple. You just have tilt and pan essentially. So if you tilt this forward, just make sure it doesn't go left and right, and then just make sure it's even on this axis going up and down. And it's got these little knobs. You can slide it back and forth. If you've used a Ronin gimbal before, this is going to be super simple. If you do not unlock these and you start it up, it's going to give you an error. It's going to start making noises. It's going to scare you quite a bit. The thing is going to shake a little bit. It's going to put a little bit of stress on the motor. From what I've read, it doesn't really affect anything. It just, like I said, it makes me really nervous when I start putting stress on these little tiny, Asian motors, and, something breaks and you don't have the support to back you up on it. So once you start this thing up, it's going to engage all the motors after you've done all the updates and everything. And then you're probably wondering, how do I get this Z-axis chicken head thing to start going? Now, there's a little knob here on the side. You have to turn this and kind of pull it to unlock it. And then you can hit the 4D button on the side and it'll just kind of pop up and do like the little chicken head thing, which is really cool. So it's not like that's super complicated to figure out. On the side here, you do have the gimbal modes, the off, the follow, and the lock for the gimbal. And then you got pan follow, pan tilt, pan follow roll, or FPV mode. You have two C1 and C2 options down here that you can program to whatever you want. So as default, it's recenter and Z mode. Z mode stiffens the Z axis a little bit. So if you're like in a car or something, it's just gonna add a little bit extra tension on there. You will see the little gimbal head sign on the monitor go red when you first start this up, most likely. And that just means you need to adjust the Z axis of this. So the way you do that is like a little knob right on the top here. And it's got a plus and a minus. Just like a steady cam arm or like a tilt to float arm, you just kind of crank it or loosen it to make sure that the tension on the arm is correct. It will tell you which direction to go, so it's kind of dummy proof. I think everybody's gonna be able to figure it out just fine. Moving over to the rest of the side of this, you do have the multi-wheel, which is going to be a focus wheel by default. You also have your Pro SSD card area, which you can put a CFast B card in. There are some limitations with putting onto a CFast B versus the Pro SSD card, such as the Pro SSD card is the only thing you can film 8K RAW on, from my understanding. So if you want to do that stuff, you're probably going to be sticking with these $700-800 cards. It just kind of is what it is. I've already gotten over it, so I feel like you gotta suck it up when you buy one of these and get two of these, because that's what works the best on this. Moving over to the handles, you have your controls that you're pretty used to for the gimbal. You have these locks on the side here that you can take these off and stick these on the monitor. So they just kind of slide off. There's a little lock button here. You also have your exposure button and then a zoom button here with the lock. On the inside, you have a really useful button here. It's the M button, which is a sport mode button. I find myself using this more than I thought that I was going to be using it. So for example, I was following a person around into a house for like a real estate thing, and he wanted to show off some of the stuff in the house. So this is tracking him live. And so instead of going into the monitor and taking him off the tracking function, you hold this button and it just turns into a regular camera, which kind of puts the gimbal into a standard handheld type mode, which is really cool and super useful. Also, when I was in the car, he was speaking next to me. We would hit some bumps and go over some turns, and the gimbal would want to start tracking with the car. You put it in sport mode and it just kind of locks on the subject. Now for the high bright monitor, these just slide right in. I am going to buy another pair of these so that way the operator can have a set of handles, and then you can have your AC or a director or, you know, a good friend or whoever else is on set with you kind of hold one of these and operate it. When you just use the mirroring function on this with the gyroscope and control the camera, it works fine. There's just some usefulness to having these triggers and everything on the side. So this trigger on the left side, I believe, just kind of locks the gimbal while you're moving. So it's pretty much the same trigger that you're used to on a Ronin. Also on this side, if you double tap this button, it will recenter the gimbal, which is super useful to have a quick function to do that, rather than going into the menu and having to do that yourself manually. On the right side, when you hit that trigger button twice, it'll unlock the Z mode. So it's the same thing as putting in 4D mode. You can change what the triggers do. So on that side, I have when you hold the trigger down and then turn the wheel, it engages the zoom. Otherwise, you would have to change the dial wheel to do that. So I don't want to do that. I want to be able to keep my focus wheel doing that. Or you can hit the mode button and go through the menu, and it's going to go through all the ISO and the aperture and everything to get all the way around to the zoom function. So it's nice to have a quick little zoom button that you can just hit two buttons and zoom in and out. So if you want to do things like dolly zooming. And then also on the other handle, we have, like I said, the mode button, we have the record button, and then you have your focus peaking. With the handles and just, you know, the monitor, you can control this whole camera, which is super nice. There's not really anything that you can't do with just the setup right here with your hands in this configuration. You also have the autofocus button on the inside. So if you want to change between auto manual focus and autofocus, you can just click that button and also turn off autofocus. So super nice. But yeah, you can control this whole thing just from like this right here. So like I said, I did set this down on a table and I just held this. I didn't really need to use the monitor for anything other than just monitoring the footage. for this situation, but I can see like if you're in a car and somebody's got to lock onto this camera into a passenger or rear seat, to have somebody else operate this and be able to control the gimbal head just by moving this using the mirror mode is super nice. I do have the high gain antennas also. Those run, I think, $65 or $75 for 4 of them. If you want to have 8 of them, which is probably what you're gonna need for the receiver and transmitter combo, you're gonna have to get 2 of those sets. So just something to be aware of. All right, so that's pretty much everything that you already know about this system, but what you didn't know about this system is, like I said, the lens thing is a big deal. That might be a deal breaker for a lot of people. I'm fine using primes. I like using primes on most of my stuff anyway. If you want that flexibility for zoom stuff, you're probably just gonna have to use a different camera because it's probably not gonna work unless you're okay with the 17-28 until DJI comes up with another version of this lens that has different focal lengths. The next thing is the dynamic range expansion mode on this camera. I assume that this had like an 8,000 and 4,000 or 5,000 ISO natively on this, is that's what I saw online, but it's actually 320 and 1600. Not the end of the world. It's 12-bit versus 14-bit. You are gonna, when you put it in high dynamic range mode, you are gonna get a little bit more motion blur and stuff. So you're gonna sacrifice some things to get that extra dynamic range to kind of put this on par with like the FX3's dynamic range. So just something to be aware of. It also takes up more data to put it in that mode. So I haven't tested how much footage on this 1 terabyte card you can get just shooting all day on that. But with the non-dynamic range expansion mode, I was able to film from about 10 a.m. until I think 2 p.m. with a client. And that was, you know, on and off. For the most part, I was recording. For the meeting, it was like an hour, and then we were driving in the car and did these other things. So probably got like a collective, you know, hour or so 4K footage. Plenty of space there for, you know, your basic 4K stuff that you're going to be doing. If you do want to do the 8K stuff, I hear that you can only get like 20-25 minutes of raw footage on this thing. And like I said, that's only recordable to the Pro SSD. The specifics of that in terms of codec and everything, you can look online and find that out. I haven't done the research and all that yet. And I don't want to give you any wrong information. There's already people who do videos on all that stuff. I do know that I film mostly in 4K anyway, so I don't really have a need to shoot anything in 8K. So I'm not super worried about it. And I did purchase the Pro SSD card so I can use all the modes in this. So it's not really a big concern for me. Next thing you might not know is the tracking mode with this LiDAR sensor on here. So it took me a minute to figure this out. We had this thing up and going. We were following each other around, just doing some test footage, and we couldn't get this thing to track and couldn't figure out why. Tried changing all the modes and everything in here, and it was just frustrating us. And then finally we figured out, we didn't even look it up, we just figured out you have to draw this like little green box around the subject, and then this will follow them. So it's just like something that's kind of a little quirky to be aware of. It's probably in the instruction manual somewhere. I didn't read that in all honesty all the way through. So just trying to, you know, figure this camera out, but that's something that you're probably going to want to know too, because you're probably going to want to use that function. Now in tracking mode, this does do a really good job of keeping the subject centered. If they do get uncentered for any reason, you just move the gimbal, get them recentered, and then it'll keep them tracked wherever that is. So if you want them off to the left or the right side of the frame, and that's where you want to track them at, wherever you move the gimbal, that's where it's going to keep them at for the duration that it's following them. So that seems to work pretty well. The autofocus uses a little bit different technology than what we're used to with like things like the Sony FX3, where it's not tracking eyes and stuff. It's kind of chasing like your head or body shape or like objects and stuff. So I haven't had any issues with it. I do notice that like it picks up like the focus for me on my beard more than my eyes, which is, you know, it's not like too much of a distance, but like when you get in close, you can start to kind of tell that the eyes get a little bit soft. I'm not really sure why it does that, but you can also use auto manual focus mode to, if it's not picking up the focus that you want, you can, you know, just tweak the wheel a little bit and get your focus back in. It does also have those built-in ND filters, which is nice. So you can just change those by clicking the little button on that says clear with ND clear, and then just go through your different stops through there. Pretty easy and intuitive to use. The 4D expansion plate for this is something else to be aware of if you want things like time code, SDI, and a couple XLR inputs. To add to this, other than just using 3.5mm jack on here, that's going to run another $500. So that's something else to be aware of. This doesn't do all that kind of like natively. You have to buy that plate to go sandwich in between the battery and the video transmission unit, which, you know, I'm gonna be honest, like the whole battery system on this is just a little hokey to me. How you disconnect these things, there's no like really quick connects. I mean, the battery obviously is quick connect, but like the plate for it and then the transmitter, it's all like kind of screwed in, and they sandwich together, and it just seems like it doesn't fit like the camera world stuff where we're used to like dovetails and things sliding in and out, and, you know, my quarter 20 screws. These are very like weird, small, like, you know, Allen screws and stuff like that come with the tools for it and everything, but it's just not what we're used to or what I'm used to. So this whole thing is kind of weird. Speaking on the battery portion of this, I went with the TB50s batteries for this, the batteries that are recommended for this. There is a plate out there for a V-mount that they make, third party. From what I hear, it does have like a cooling element to it because it's made out of aluminum, and they say it's got a radiator or whatever in it. And it looks interesting and compelling. I did not end up picking it up because I spent so much on this camera, and like I said, with the DJI support, so much for me. I know cameras can be extremely expensive, and this is the low end of, you know, high end of consumer pro, low end of, you know, going into pro. But that battery plate is not recommended by DJI. I messaged them about it. They said that they have these vents on this battery plate that comes with this, and this is for heat dissipation and control. And if you change that, it's going to avoid the warranty and everything. Not that they would know. Sony says that stuff all the time on their cameras, but it seems to work fine. But I just don't want to damage this camera because you don't get the same support level that you get from other manufacturers, from what I can tell. It seems like you're talking to like a VA in another country when you're talking to DJI, and they just really don't understand cameras, and it takes you 4 or 5 email chains down the road to get someone who actually knows something about this. And it's just kind of a big pain. And it's not something I recommend that people go through. It hasn't been like a good process for me when I've done it or tried to find answers for problems on this. So it's not something I really want to deal with, is, you know, putting on aftermarket things that's, and being the guinea pig for it. You know, this thing, I think, just came out like a week or 2 ago. I will mention the company that has this in the description below, but like I said, I don't recommend being the person to guinea pig this. DJI doesn't recommend putting anything but their stuff on here. The manufacturer that makes that V-mount plate adapter says it'll be fine. I know some people also use a red 6-pin Lee mount to power this up, and then they'll put like a battery plate on like a belt or something to mount like a gold mount battery or a V-mount battery and P-tap that in. It seems like we're just kind of getting away from, you know, what this thing does. To me, it's just like if 4 batteries keep on charging, they only take like 30-40 minutes to charge. I haven't had any problems with that. These batteries last for about an hour or so, which is on par with most, you know, 99-watt batteries that are out there. So, you know, it's not like if you're 50 or 90-watt batteries, it's not like it's anything that's absurd or unheard of with these batteries. I think people just don't want to get into that ecosystem of having more batteries because we've got the NP batteries, we got the Sony batteries, V-mount, gold mount, and then you just got a whole, you know, basement full of batteries and chargers and stuff like that. They're not terribly expensive. They're only $175 a piece, I believe, or $180, something like that. The charger was only $125 for a quad charger. It's not the end of the world to me. I knew when I was getting this, there was going to be another $5,000 to $10,000 in accessories, just something that I kind of like planned on. I know like everybody can't kind of plan on those things, but I do want to say that when you get this, you are going to want to get the monitor, an additional set of handles for this, and then you're going to want to get the transmitter and all that good stuff. The adapters for the E mount, for the PL mount, all those good things. And this is going to add up really, really quickly. So I would anticipate like another $5,000 to $8,000 on top of the purchase price for this, for you to get kind of kitted and loaded out, and just anticipate that's what's going to happen. And it's probably going to be more than that. Like I said, like with the expansion blade, and you know, I ended up having like a custom box built for this too, so that was another few $100. It starts to add up. And then you probably also want 4 of these SSD cards. We often take them and, you know, we'll send them out to an editor, and they'll, you know, we'll have a backup, and they'll take 1, and then we'll have, you know, the 2 more for the next shoot or whatever. Just have 1, 2, 3, and 4. It's pretty standard for us to have like 4 SSD cards, you know, per camera that's working. So we got 2 that's offloading, and then 2 that's, you know, onloading kind of thing. But whatever fits, you know, your workflow. Then you add in things like the flex system and the monopod, which, you know, you're probably going to end up getting those things. I told myself, okay, well, I'll just get the camera and I get those later. And as soon as I got this thing, I had to get the backpack with the flex system and, you know, all the stuff that goes with that. So, you know, then you're in another couple $1,000s there. So The reason why I'm making this video is because a lot of people don't mention these things. They just mention how cool this is. And then I've seen some videos of people saying this is like a silly camera. I think it's a cool camera, but I do want to say you're starting to get into the pretty close to the Sony Burano range when you get this in terms of price tag, when you get it all kitted out and everything. Those cameras do two different things. So if you're looking to get into the pro cinema world, and you're cool just having like a good old-fashioned stationary camera with, you know, in-body stabilization, I would probably start looking at like something like the Sony Burano instead. You know, sometimes I've looked at this camera and I thought, I know it's been out for a while. I just got it personally, you know, not too long ago. I've been playing with it. I'm like, man, maybe I should got a Burano for what I got into this. And then I think, no, this, when I'm on set with it, like, it just makes me smile. There's nothing that's really kind of does this, and it's really cool and interesting. So I am happy with my decision of getting with this personally, but I just want to give all that information out there. That's the price tag is going to exceed some things in terms of like some of the functionality with like the zoom and connecting these things, the customer support issue. I wanted to make this video because this is a big price tag for a lot of us. I know in camera world, like this is not a lot of money. $15,000, $20,000 is kind of a drop in the bucket for like most of these things. I mean, if you look at like lenses and REs and things like that, like, you know, it's not that much money for comparatively to those things. But like for us, getting from the prosumer, living between prosumer and the pro world, you know, doing like commercial stuff, we're getting paid, but maybe we're not doing, Disney movies or anything like that yet, or Netflix movies. This is a big investment and a big decision is what I'm saying. So I just want to make sure you have as much information, and I wanted to be as helpful as possible as I can. Also, I'm sure I missed a couple things. If you have any questions or you think of anything, just leave me a comment and I'll try to respond to it as quick as I can. That's all I have today. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you found it helpful.